On page 89, the last two words of the Shulchan Aruch. It's in Siman Lamed Beis, Sif Tes Zayin. We're near the end of the Sif. Just the last two words of the Shulchan Aruch on page 89. Hodem Achshurinon. I'm already turning the page. Hodem Achshurinon Kishenifsak Ois Dafke Kishenichtab Bekashrus Va'achar Kach Nifsak. אבל מתחילה כשנכתב, או יש שם נקב, ונפסק בוי, עם רגל הכף הפשוטו, אוי כיצב, זה מגיע לסוף הכף בלי הקף כף, או עם רגל הכף הפשוטו, אוי כיצב, מגיע לסוף הכף, בלי הקף כף, מתחילה סוף פוסק. What does it say here? We were talking about if the leg of the Vav or the Zayin of a similar letter is too short. If it's too short, and it looks like a Yud, we said show it to a child. Okay? Now we mentioned that this is the same halacha whether it was written too short or whether it was written long enough but it was the ink flaked off, or whether there was a hole in the parchment which made the letter shorter. Now in this case where there's a hole in the parchment, here the Shulchan Aruch is just telling us that we have an extra problem, besides the fact that we have to check if the letter is still intact, if it's still kosher, if the child will still read it as the correct letter. If there's a hole in the parchment, we have the additional problem we've already talked about, which is mukaf-gevil, that the whole letter has to be surrounded by parchment. Okay, and if it's not surrounded by parchment on all sides, if there's a hole there, it's not surrounded by parchment, the place where there's a hole, therefore will be possible. But he mentions that, as we mentioned already, the psul of mukaf-gevil, surrounded by parchment, is only at the time it's written. If the hole happened later, as long as the letter's still kosher, it's okay, because the psul of mukaf-gevil is only at the time of writing, not afterwards. Right? So that's what Shulchan Aruch just told us. When we said it's kosher, when we said it's kosher, in the case where the ois has a hole in it, that's only if it was nichtav bekashrus, it was written kosher, and then afterwards, there was a hole in the. But if it was, how do you determine that? So the sofer will know when it happened. If you open up a pair of Tefillen afterwards, or mezuzah afterwards, you find a hole, how do you know? So we already mentioned this once, but now it's actually written in the MISHNA Berura, so we'll have a look. MISHNA Berura Sukkot Nun Hey, approximately in the middle of the page. Nun Hey, Mitchila, Ubesofek. On page 19, middle of page Mitchila. Ubesofek Mosai Nasa Hanek. If you don't know when the hole was made, Toilen to Achak Siva Nasa, we assume it was written after the writing. Probably if it was the time of writing, the sofer would have noticed. He wouldn't have written a pair of tefillin and given to someone on mezuzah if it has a hole in the parchment. So therefore, he says, unless it's a very small hole which is barely noticeable. If it's a very small hole which is barely noticeable, then maybe then we'd be worried maybe the sofer didn't notice it. But if it's a recognizable hole, then we'd assume the sofer would have noticed if it happened at the time. Therefore, we can assume it happened after the time of writing, and the tefillin are kosher. Okay, as long as the letter still has the two essays, right? As long as it still looks like the letter it's supposed to be. The vav still looks like a vav, and it doesn't look like a yud, as long as the leg is long enough. Okay, let's move on to the next if. Okay, the next if Yud Zayin. Okay, I'd like to learn today Sif Yud Zayin. Tomorrow we're going to learn Sif Yud Ches, and that finishes a kind of a group of sifim, which are this topic of very technical halachas about the actual writing. That finishes the end of Sif Yud Ches, and then we'll move over to Chanukah. That's the plan.
It's a good break.
Okay, so let's try and do Sif Yud Zayin today. Sif Yud Zayin. If not, in Nofa, we're going to learn another very important yesod called chok-toichos. That's the name of the yesod we're going to see now. Chok-toichos. Let's see. Sif Yud Zayin. Noflo tipas diyoy lesoicha ois. A drop of ink fell into the letter. Okay, what happens? A drop of ink fell onto the letter.
Afterwards.
Yeah, afterwards, at the time, afterwards. Here there's no difference if it happened at the time of writing or happened afterwards. Either way, there's now a drop of the ink on the letter. Okay? Now the letter is unrecognizable. You can't just scrape off the ink. Right? Let's say and through scraping off the ink make the letter recognizable. Right? Let's say, for example, you have a mem. Let's talk about mem sofit, right? Which is a square with a hollow in the middle, and then a drop of ink fell inside the mem. and now you have just a box.
Right.
Okay? So what would you think of doing? You'd say, let's just scrape out the ink in the middle, and then we'll have a mem again. The Shulchan says you cannot do that. Why can't we do that? To have a chok toichos. Those are the important words to remember. These two words, chok toichos, that's what it's called. It's called chok. What does it mean, chok toichos? The mezuzah has to be written through writing, and not through scraping off. Right? If you take, let's say, theoretically, you take a piece of paper completely covered in ink, right, and then you'd scrape off all the ink you don't want, leaving the letters, right? That's called chok toiches. You didn't create the letters by writing the letters. You created the letters by erasing the part you don't want. That's no good, because it says uchesavtom. You have to write the mezuzah. The mezuzah is created through writing, not through erasing.
It's like tasei v'lo mina asui.
It is similar. It's quite similar. Yeah, similar concept.
Which means
You have to make it. It can't be made like a sukkah. You can't use it just because it has schach on it. You have to take the schach off and put it back. So you're doing a maisi, you're doing an action.
right.
Another example of this is if he wrote a dalid instead of a reish. Reish and dalid are very similar letters. The difference is the dalid is square at the top and not just square. We even have an okev coming out at the top of the dalid. So if he wrote the dalid instead of the reish, could he just rub out the bit that sticks out and then round it off? Right? All through rubbing. That's the same problem. That's chok toichus. He hasn't created the reish through writing the reish. He's created it through rubbing out the extra part, scraping off the extra part. Or base b'makom kaf, the same thing, to turn a base into a kaf. He by mistake wrote a base instead of a kaf. If he erases the extra part of the base sticking out and turns it into a kaf, he's created the kaf through erasing, not through writing, and that's possible. You can't just be moichik, the tag that sticks out, the second ois. This is like chok toichus. This is also no good.
What about the opposite? You have a reish and you put that extra piece on and make it to a dalit.
That's fine. You've turned it into dalit through writing.
Even though you didn't do the whole dalit, but through the maisa of adding that extra ink, you turned it into a dalit.
That's correct. The whole dalit was written through writing. He wrote the reish part, and then he added the extra part to write the dalit. The whole thing was done through writing. That's fine.
So does it mean that you need to erase the whole letter and start again?
Excellent question. We haven't talked about what yes to do. We talked about what not to do. Okay, so how does one correct it? Excellent. Let's have a look. What does one have to do to correct it? So we'll go through a couple of MISHNA Beruras in order. I'll tell you which ones. And the first one's not talking about your point, but we'll see exactly how to correct it in just a minute. If we read the first one, Sifkot Samach Aleph, Dioi, v'huadin seva acher, ink or any other color, im alidei ze nishtana tzuras ois. If it changes, this halach is applicable if the ink or any other color fell on the letter enough that it loses the form of the correct form of the letter. Avol not a shava lois. If wax fell on the letter, which was very common in those days when they were using waxed candles, even though it's covering the letter, and the letter is not recognizable, the shaiva here is just something lying on top of the letter. So one could scrape off the wax and see that, and the letter is underneath. That's fine, because the letter wasn't created through writing. The letter was always there, it was just covered up. So we're making a distinction here between ink or any other material which actually changes the actual form of the letter to wax, which is just covering up the letter. Okay? So to any piece of, nowadays it wouldn't be so relevant with wax, but it could be a piece of dirt which got stuck on top of the letter. It would be fine to remove this. It's just covering the letter, that's not a problem with chok-toichus. Okay, if we have a look at...
so if you removed, say, wax and it removed part of the letter, you could just replace that part of the letter.
Yeah.
No problem. Right.
Well, we're going to see in a minute that you can't always replace parts of a letter. We haven't learned the halacha. Okay. With Tefillen, this is not so simple to replace letters. Yeah. We'll see. If we have a look, okay, I'm now continuing 7 lines from the bottom, the first word on the line. Ve'im mistapek. V'im. 7 lines from the bottom, first one line. V'mistapik b'ha'osim tzurosolov. If we're unclear if the letter has the correct form or not, then one shows it to a child, like we saw in the previous halacha. One shows it to a child. We're continuing now with the next sifkot dal ligro. Another thing that doesn't help, we haven't yet got to what one should do. We mentioned not to erase it. Erasing the ink does not create it into a letter. Even if one would, after one erases after one scrapes off the ink that fell off. It says the MISHNA Berura, even one would be ma'avil kulmus, he then writes again over the letter. The letter's already there, he writes over it. That's not going to help. The letter's already there. Let's say he has the mem, he rubbed out the middle of the mem. The mem was possible because of chok-tochis. He then writes over the mem again with his kulmus, creates the letter. That doesn't help. The mem's already there. He just wrote on top of an already existing mem. That's no good. It's also no good. So what should he do? Okay, so now we're now on the bottom line of the MISHNA Berura. The bottom line, Sifkot Samach Zayin. The bottom line of page 91. V'zeh gam kein chakiko mikri, kiven she'enoi ois emaisa begufa ois. Elo, what should he do? Yigro gam kein kitzas meha ois. What he has to do is he has to scrape off part of the letter. Okay, we're now on the top line of page 92. Yigro gam kein kitzas meha ois. He should scrape off part of the letter until the letter has not got the correct form anymore.
Of any letter.
Whichever letter is the problem, right. He has to scrape off until it hasn't got the form. No, it hasn't got the form of this letter.
This letter.
This letter. It could have the form of a different letter. I'll give you an example. Let's say it's a daled, right? Let's say it's a daled, and the ink fell on the daled. It's now unrecognizable. He scrapes off the ink. He's now left with his daled. The daled is possible because of chok-tochis. He has two options with his daled, right? The daled looks like this. 1 second. For me, it looks like this. For you, it looks like that, right? Okay. So he's got his daled. Okay, it's now apostle daled because he created it to chok-tochis. Okay, he has two options. He doesn't have to rub out the whole letter. He has to make it now passel the daled. He has to rub it off in a way that doesn't look like a daled anymore, and then rewrite the extra part. He has two options. He can either remove part of the leg, or remove the regel, that's called the regel, or part of the top, which is called the rosh. Either the regel or the rosh. But it's slightly different. The two halachas are slightly different. If he's removing the regel, he has to remove enough of the regel that it's not a kosher daled anymore. Right? We mentioned that the minimum size of a daled is the size of the regel of the daled. We already saw is to have a meloyos katana, a small amount, big enough to be a yud. Right? So it has to be less than that, which is nearly the entire regel. If he's removing the rosh, once you remove part of the rosh, okay, it's going to look like a zayin. So you have to remove enough that he's turned it into a zayin, and then he could rewrite that part of the. The main thing is that he passed it. He has to remove enough that it's not a daled anymore. That's the idea. Okay. So he has to remove enough that Yigo kam ken k'tas at shelo yishal tu rasolov. He has to rub off enough of the letter that it doesn't anymore have the shape of this letter that's supposed to be. And then afterwards he corrects it. Afterwards he'll rewrite it. Okay. Okay. We're going to see we haven't yet got to the halacha of shemoneh-esrei. In Tefillen and mezuzos, we'll learn about it. Then one has to write the letters in order. So one has a problem correcting letters in Tefillen and mezuzos. We'll learn about that. It'll only be after Chanukah. We'll get to it. Okay. The cholzeh. We're continuing now with the Shulchan Aruch on the third line. The cholzeh adin the Shulchan Aruch hu machmas shehois eino niker v'nispatel alidei zeh ksiv harishonu. Aval if lo nishtana tzuras ois. This is only if. This entire halacha is only if enough ink fell on the letter that the form of the original letter is unrecognizable. If the letter still has its correct form, then he can rub out the ink. If let's say the ink fell on the leg of the daled and made it a very thick leg, but it still looks like a daled, right? He can then scrape off the part of the ink that fell on that fell on the letter, rub it off. That's not a problem, because the scraping off is not creating the dalet. Even before he scraped, it has the form of a dalet. He's just scraping it to make it a nicer dalet, to make it look more like a dalet, to make it the correct proportions exactly. But even without scraping, it looks like a dalet. There's no problem of chok-tochis, you can do that. And Mishnah Berura continues, he doesn't even need to make a correction if he doesn't want to, because it looks like a dalet. You're actually used to it, it's just preferable to correct it. And therefore you can make this correction. There's no problem of chok-tochis, and there's also no problem of shaloi kesidron. There's no problem, and when tefillin and mezuzahs, you can do that. It's no problem. Okay.
What is the sofer looking at when he's writing? Is he looking at a tikkun, or is he looking at another Torah?
He's looking at that's okay. It works like this. The main one of the complications.
Sounds like it was a good question.
One of the complications of a sofer writing is he has to space the letters exactly. He needs the letters that he wants to finish the line at the correct space, right? At the correct place on the line. If you end up, he wants it to look straight, right? Mm-hmm. And you can't end a word. You can't end the line in the middle of a word. He needs to end the line exactly at the end of the word. Mm-hmm. He also doesn't want to, when he gets to the end of the line, to have to squash the letters,
right? Because
it's not going to look nice. Certain letters you can't squash, right? Mm-hmm. Or you can let off for some lengths, you can make some letters you can make slightly longer, but only a couple. Right. Those letters we don't allow you to make wider. So he has to space the letters. When he's writing each letter, he has to know already at the beginning of the line, is this a line that's got slightly more letters, or a line that's got slightly less letters? Right? And also, it doesn't work exactly by the number of letters, because a yud is much smaller than a mem.
Right.
Okay? So, what he has in front of him is he has... it's called a tikkun, but it tells him. Okay. It tells it it's not a tikkun korim. It's not a tikkun that we use for laning. It's a tikkun that tells him with each line. It tells him how many yudim that are in that line. A mem is the space of 3 yuds. Right? It tells him how many on that line, 68, 69, 71. Tells him how many on that line. How many yudim now on that line, which will tell him already at the beginning of the line if he's going to be making the letters slightly smaller or slightly bigger.
Right.
He already knows at the beginning of the line how he has to space that line. Right. Okay?
So he has a special tikkun that he's...
Yeah, it's not special tikkun.
Is that a tikkun sofrim?
No, tikkun sofrim, is that tikkun sofrim?
We call this a tikkun
This is called tikkun korim. Is it called tikkun sofrim? I don't know.
So I went to buy a tikkun once, and I bought a tikkun sofrim. Just wondering if that's what it was. It
could be. Does it have those numbers on the side?
I don't remember.
Okay, because that has the numbers on the side. With the Sefer Torah, it's particularly difficult because with Tefillen, he gets used to writing it.
Right.
With Sefer Torah, every line is something new.
New challenge.
So, new challenge. Yes. Okay. We've got a minute left. We saw the idea of the sif. Let's just see if there's any important MISHNA Berura to read. Okay, let's just have a look at Be'er Halacha. One Be'er Halacha, and then we'll stop. The Be'er Halacha, and if you could turn back the page, we have Be'er Halacha Devar Masel Tipas. So it's in the Be'er Halacha, that's the left column, and it's 7 lines from the top.
Tipas Dio?
Yeah, in Tipas Dio. So here he's worried about the names of it. If we start there from the second line of that Be'er Halacha, v'manativ ha'le'oisius mishemos she'ein nimchokin af b'choil osa she'yesh locha she'es kalif k'tas me'ois. He's worried that when we talked about scraping off the wax, if it fell on one of the names of Hashem, and you scrape off the wax, we're worried that he's going to scrape off part of the name of Hashem. So that's going to be a problem. So what he says, what one should do, he should warm up the cloth near the place where the wax fell on it, and then when it's liquid, then he'll be able to to remove the wax.
Interesting.
Then he talks about what to do if it happened on Shabbos during the laning, and one can't scrape it off. What should one do? So he mentioned if you can see the letter through the wax, it's fine. If the letter is completely covered by the wax, he finds it during one of the breaks in the laning. Right, then it's very simple. We can put the Sefer Torah back and take out a new one. But then he mentions that if it happens during the middle of the laning, we can't stop. We don't want to stop the laning in the middle. So he says we can continue the laning. So he mentions we continue it. He mentions we can continue the laning, and then one just continues. One carries on.
How can you continue the laning if you can't see the letter?
So one would read that letter Baal Peh. Even though generally one doesn't read any letters Baal Peh, this would read it Baal Peh. Okay, we'll stop here.